I'm building a model of an old printing press. Over the past few months, I've made a working prototype and machined a few pieces. In this episode, though, I'm going to be working on the roller mechanism in the back. Two pieces, called the roller frames, move back and forth to ink the plate. Another pair of linkages on either side actuate the roller frames. I'm going to begin by working on the side linkages. They're each made out of 1/4-inch steel plate. I referenced off my CAD model when laying out these parts. I rough cut the piece of steel on my metal cutting bandsaw. Now, this started out smoothly, but because this was such a long cut, I actually didn't have quite enough throat clearance to perform the entire operation. So I had to find a different way to cut the middle section, in between the two cuts on either side. The best solution I could come up with was the mill. I plunged down and made a few passes to remove the bulk of the material. Oops. Let me try that again. I ended up not going all the way through. I was worried that the spinning bit might grab the piece and launch it across the room. But I could bend the material back and forth to get it to fatigue and break. Now I could start to machine in all the features, starting with the holes. So I just made a pretty grievous error. When I was moving the mill over to drill the second hole for the linkage, it didn't seem like I was moving it far enough. When I moved it to the position I thought it should be at, my mark and my mill weren't lining up. So I got on a second thing and I measured it again, I checked the plans, and in fact, I just completely laid it out wrong. I made it like 2 inches too short, and the material I have isn't long enough to make it the full length. So I'm going to have to order some more material and figure that out for these pieces, which kind of sucks and is going to push us back a little bit. But what is good is I can take this piece that I was milling up and use it for another part. So it's not a complete waste, but it's just kind of a setback. I really don't screw up this bad very often, but while this piece is too short to make a side linkage, I think I have a different idea. I need to make another sort of linkage that will eventually attach to one of the roller frames. This linkage will attach the roller frame to the side frame and will cause each roller frame to move up and down. And by sheer luck, this part would fit onto my piece of metal. So I'll make that instead. The process is very similar to the linkage I was going to make anyway, so you're not really missing out on much. The midsection of this linkage even has a curve. On one end, I'll bore out a hole to fit a radial bearing. And on the other, I'll drill a regular hole. Next, I need to cut this part out of the piece of metal. But afterwards, I need a way to re-square the piece to the mill. So to make this easier for myself, I'm going to machine a flat surface that I can indicate against later to remount the piece onto the table. Once the part is a bit closer to its final form, I'll mount it back on the mill to clean up all the straight sections. To handle the curves, I'll use a file. Just like the pieces from last time, I wasn't able to nicely clean up the round ends. I'm still waiting for a rotary table I ordered to come in the mail, and I can't do much until it arrives. But look what did finally arrive. Some more steel plate long enough to make the original linkages. Let me put those together real quick. Just like the other linkage, I'll lay them out. I'll rough cut each to size. Drill holes at each end. Clean up the sides. And enlarge the holes to fit some bearings. Here's the result. The next pair of pieces I need to work on are the roller frames. There's one roller frame on each side, and together they carry the rollers. When they move up and down, they're responsible for inking the printing plate. These pieces are the first in the press, made from 1/2-inch steel. Just like everything else, it starts with some layout work. Now, this part has a bit more of a complex geometry. The sides are tapered. Some features are laid out in the regular coordinate space, and some are laid out in the tapered coordinate space. It's nothing I can't handle, it just requires some careful thought. I again ran into throat clearance problems on the bandsaw. This time, I'm going to drill some holes to provide a place for my bandsaw blade to pivot and cut around that protruding feature. I'm going to begin by boring the center hole. Now I'll drill a bunch of holes. And the last big feature, 2 matching slots. I'm going to use the stops on my mill to make sure I make both slots consistent. Now I need to clean up the edges. To do this, I'll set an aluminum bar along the line I laid out, and then indicate along it. If I'm off by a few thou here, that's fine. This taper serves a purely visual purpose. And it's done. Well, almost. I still have a bunch of final finishing things to do once I get that rotary table. Hey, wait a second. Is that a rotary table? I'm just kidding around. After like 5 weeks, this thing finally arrived. Let's put it to good use. I'm going to round off the back corners of the roller frames. To ensure I'm rotating around the center, I'll indicate the hole I drilled earlier. Very nice. That looks a lot more put together. Okay, now all that's left is a bunch of small pieces I need to make on the lathe. End caps, shaft collars, things like that. I'm going to go through how I made the most complex of them, the bed shaft end cap. These sit at the end of the bed shaft and provide an offset location to attach each side linkage. And if you're curious, attaching the side linkages at an offset will allow me to adjust the impression depth of the press later on. Anyway, these pieces start life as 2-inch thick slices of some 2-inch round bar. I'll load each into the lathe and face the material. Then I'll form a stepped feature. Next, I'll bore a hole down the middle for the 5/8 inch back shaft that this part will interface with. Along one end, I'll add some holes for some set screws. For the time being, I'm not going to add a keyway into this part, but I'm probably going to do this later on. Now, I'll pick up the center of the hole I bored on the lathe, and use this to position the offset hole. Freshly off the mill, I'll tap both of the set screw holes. And also the offset hole. I spent a lot of time making sure the tap was straight for this one. If I was doing this again, I probably would have tapped this while the part was still in the mill. And now all the parts are finally done. Time to put them together. It took me almost a month of machining, but it was worth it. This is a really neat mechanism. Rotating the back shaft changes the impression depth. This later on will be fixed at a certain position during regular operation. Right now, to actuate the side linkages, I'm using these foam pieces from my Letterpress prototype. A lot of the imprecision in this mechanism right now can be traced back to these things. In the next episode, I'm going to be machining these parts out of metal, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching!